afternoon and welcome to the Youth Economy Agency. It is our pleasure to pave the way for significant economic development based on the creativity, tenacity of our young people. This afternoon, we are welcoming you to the first in our three-part series entitled Businesses of the Future, the Next Big Thing. With us to kick off the series is our Director General of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, Dr. Didacus Jules, who has been described for many as a visionary, progressive, and a forward-thinking individual from the Caribbean who paved the way from a young person in Grenada, revolutionizing the education sector over there, and even here in St. Lucia, being one of the first to pioneer the Folk Research Center and being a visionary in our National Youth Council as a student leader and a youth leader. And today he is leading the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States in regional development. Thank you so very much for joining us today, Dr. Jules. So I will hand over to Dr. Jules because, of course, you're not here for you to listen to me. You're here to listen to the visionary himself about businesses of the future and what is the next big thing for us in the Caribbean and in St. Lucia.
Okay, thanks very much, Crystal. And what I'd like to do is to make this session as interactive as possible. So perhaps we could begin with you all introducing yourselves, who you are, what is your interest in business, and then we take it from there. Yeah.
Alright, so I am Noah Caesar, better known as Noah Seas, and when it comes to business, I major in marketing, social media vibes, podcasting, stuff of that nature. Basically, my whole vibe is edutainment, so educating and entertaining through my brand and writing.
Well, it sounds like very much like you're already into the jobs of the future.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Edutainment. And it's Noah. And you, miss?
My name is Jerona Antal. I am an event designer and the owner of Decor Delivered. As the name suggests, I'm into decorating and gifting services.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Aria Esnad. I'm a student of SAL-CC. I'm a year 2, and I study business, sustainable business, and I'm very interested in the energy sector and real estate. So,
Good afternoon. My name is Renée Marie Dennis. I am a first-year student at Sir Lewis, and I also study business, but my passion is accounting because I have a love for the numbers and how it can affect a business and how the different information will be able to impact it. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thalassa Cox. I'm here in the capacity of Managing Director of the Good Director. It's an entity that actually provides governance, technical assistance, training, and assessments for nonprofit entities with a specialization in cooperatives.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Khalifa Vidal. I'm here on behalf of my twin brother and part owner of the Earthquake Media Group. We do small PA parties and whatnot.
Thank you.
What's PA?
You can just turn
What's
it off.
PA? Vida?
The small setup that we have here today would be regarded as PA, the speakers, the
Well,
microphones.
what does PA stand for?
Public announcement.
Okay.
Right.
That's it? Okay, so the reason why I wanted to start with getting a sense of who you are and what your interest is because, I mean, that topic is such a broad topic, the jobs of the future. There's a whole new universe of opportunity out there. And the challenge is how does one select or decide what you want to do? The rule of thumb in most of the advanced thinkers on that is to follow your passion. How do you make something you love your gig and to make a success of it? Because if you're in a job, and that goes for whether you're in a government job, a private sector job, or running your own business. If you work just for the sake of earning a dollar, you only earn as much as you get paid for. If you work because you work for the passion of it, you have a love for what you do, then you work differently, the results will be different. So it all starts with the mindset and what drives you. What is your impulse to success? And just picking up from what you all described as your interest. So edutainment, as I said to Noah, the edutainment is the big thing, but interestingly, what you have here is a fusion of separate things, right? Broadcasting, media, entertainment. There's a crucial role for a company like yours in the world of education. Because, in fact, we are about to have in the Caribbean, in the Cayman, in the next week or two, a major conference spearheaded by CDB, OECS, CARICOM, and the World Bank on education transformation in the Caribbean. Now, we've been talking about education transformation for the last 40 years. And have we transformed it? No. Because so much is happening so fast. And the problem is that we get stuck in the old ways of doing things and don't recognize that you have to move with the times. And sometimes the times are moving so fast ahead that keeping up is going to be very difficult. And that is why there's something called future casting. The idea is to think around the corner at what is coming next, right? And that's why I said there's a whole universe of opportunity, because in education, for example, you said you do things like podcasts and that sort of thing, but you do it in a way that it is education, but it is entertainment. Now, if I were to ask you what is the most important thing that you think needs to be done in the education system to help students to learn, what would you say that is?
The most important thing that needs to be done in the education system to help students learn, in my opinion, that would be finding out how each student learns, first of all, and then finding out what they're passionate about, and then focusing on that. Now, that sounds a bit of a niche.
Okay, but can you just reduce it? I don't want a long thesis on it, right? If I challenge you in one sentence to tell me what to do to make learning happen and to transform education.
Utilize the modern technologies. That's my belief. Utilize the modern technologies to make it more fun and more.
That's it.
Yeah, make it more fun.
Make learning fun. Once we start making learning fun, then you don't have a problem with students. I mean, those of you who are Sir Arthur, think of it. I'm sure if I ask you to tell me what are the ways, what are you doing? Accounts? Which one of you is accounts? She is. Okay, the accounts lady. Is accounts by itself something that's cool?
It has its times where it can be fun, per se, when like everything goes according to plan and it just flows. That's when it's fun. But when it starts giving problems, it's not fun again.
But what if I told you we live in very disruptive times? So in a career, you'll find that things are generally not going to go smooth. So that means you're going to be in despair for the rest of your career.
Well, I'll find a way around it. I'll try my best to persevere and do my best.
Yeah, but that's a bit of a defeatist approach. How about if you find a way to make disruption your cool?
Oh.
So the more disruptive it gets, the more out of joint your accounts become, the cooler you feel, the more in control of things you can get.
Okay.
Now, I'm saying that because data, when we talk about jobs of the future, no matter what your job is, data is bedrock. It's a starting point. Think of almost any career. In this future that we enter in, without data, your career goes nowhere. So whether you're talking accounts, if you're talking even medicine as a doctor, what is the data you need as a doctor? Crystal is my patient. I need to know all what is happening in her body. And what's the technology now? You have Apple Watches, that can tell you what my temperature is. It can tell you what my heart rate is, what my blood pressure is.
The stress
Now
level.
imagine Crystal as the doctor of the future, right now, because the future is now too, sitting in her office with what used to be a receptionist. But with the receptionist, instead of having a computer in front of her to type, she has a computer with 50 clients of Crystals at their homes, at work, doing their own thing, going about their lives, but a constant stream of data coming from devices that they wear, either smartwatches or health devices that are on them, that is constantly monitoring their vitals. So if I'm diabetic, it is also monitoring my glucose and other levels. And anytime there's a spike in it that looks like it's going to be life-threatening, and an alarm sounds on the computer
Doctor.
of the doctor's office. And the former receptionist, who's now a real monitoring assistant, can decide what to do. They can call my next of kin and say, check Didacus's glucose, give him a shot of glucose or some sugar now. Or or if it looks really serious, they can alert the emergency services, start heading out. So immediately, it changes the whole function of medicine and your role as a doctor. Now, what that means is that generally as Caribbean people, we only go to the doctor when we're sick. And most times that's when you're really, way down the tube already. But if we can have that preventative approach, and again, data is helping provide that, it means, therefore, that you can be proactive about your health. And it means many lives can be saved. Now, what's in it for the doctor? My doctor only sees me when I'm sick. But with that device, maybe I pay $50 a month so that I can be monitored. That $50 a month, if he has 100 patients, that's $50 by 100. That is being paid every month into his office. And it's not a rip-off because this is really life-saving and proactive. Whereas in the old model of medicine, when I fall sick is when I go there and I charge me $50, $100 for the visit, and then he don't see me for the next 2 years. Right? So effectively, the technology that exists now and which will become more sophisticated in the future is allowing you to do things that can reduce costs, save lives, be more profitable, and for you, be more enjoyable. And not just for you enjoying what you do, but the thousands of students, and edutainment, right? How do we apply some of that? In almost every profession, there are opportunities. Think of a teacher. I'm sure you all would have seen the results from CXC in the last couple of years, or certainly this year. Everybody is freaking out over CXC results in English, mathematics, and so on. The bottom line is, as you indicated, school is not cool. It's boring. The pedagogy is out of joint. It's rote learning, repetitive stuff. How do we make that more exciting? So English language, for example. We can't be teaching people English grammar right now by rote. How do you make it exciting? Spoken word. You all are very good at that at Sir Arthur. I've seen some of your spoken word poets. Get them to, exactly what Sir Arthur is doing with the spoken word. Get students to use language in a way that enables them to effectively communicate. You know what's extempo? You've seen extempo, Kaiso? Oh my God.
There's half of those students looking around.
Well, extempo it's an old form of calypso where somebody will start a beat. They start a slow tempo, and then they just ask you to take a topic.
And to add.
And yeah,
Yes.
it's like a freestyle.
It's a freestyle
Yeah, it is a
calypso.
freestyle, yeah, but an old-time freestyle. But what is crucial about it is that you have to follow the beat of the music and the rhythm and the tempo, and you have to rhyme.
Yes.
So right there, imagine 4 of us involved in an extempo, and we're giving each other picong, but it has to rhyme, it has to make sense, it has to follow the meter. Now that is a way of developing your thought patterns in language in a way that really tests your creativity and your mastery of the language. Now, at first it might be difficult, but as you get into that groove, you become more, more fluent in the use of language. When I was in Form 6, a group of us used to study when we were doing our A-levels, we were doing English literature, and one of it was Shakespeare, King Lear. And we used to study at Ira Dover's office in the Boulevard at the time. And I mean, Shakespeare is not the most exciting thing to study, but we decided, outside of the teacher, we just studied, we have to pass the exam. But when we get bored trying to do the usual thing, reading through Shakespeare and looking at past papers and so on, we decided, okay, let's kickstart that. So let's act out King Lear among ourselves, but using colloquial St. Lucian English, right? So we doing King Lear, then we say, let's try it in Creole, and we try to, say it in Creole, recite the different verses. And this is the kind of thing that makes things exciting for students. So that's one of the challenges there. There is a video, you all know TED Talks, right? Yeah. I recommend to all the young people, because I mentor several young people, I recommend that they look. It is called What Happens When Ideas Have Sex. Now, ideas have sex.
Please take notes so that
Yeah.
I could check later.
Yeah. Now, I mean, the topic alone obviously grabs their attention, and it's by a lecture by a guy called Matt Ridley, who is a lecturer at Oxford University, and he's also a member of the British Parliament. The essential thing that Ridley talks about, he starts the talk by showing you a Stone Age axe. I'm sure you've seen the Amerindian axes, right? Which is identical like a computer mouse. And he says, look at the two of them are both designed to fit the ergonomics of the human hand, right? To manipulate things. But the axe has a single purpose. It is stone, just a single piece of material, stone, and a single purpose to cut and do what an axe is supposed to do. The mouse, on the other hand, is a marriage of several things. It is plastic, it is metal, it is the idea of, and where the ideas have sex now, it is the idea of plastic, the idea of metal, the idea of fiber optics, the idea of computing. All of these things come together in that single device. So this is what begins to happen when you have a fusion of ideas coming together, creating things that were unimaginable before. About a year ago, Grenada had a meeting of creatives, Grenadian creatives. It was a huge seminar. They brought in top Grenadians, like you all know Mr. Killer. Yeah, Killer was one of the guys, an artist. So they brought in the artists, the creatives from all sectors, painters, artists, dancers, musicians, and so on. And I participated in this event. And it was really amazing to meet some of those young people. There was a young guy there who was 24 years old. He had received an honors award from the Royal Society of Architects. He comes from a Grenadian family that has a long history of architecture. His grandfather coming right up to his present time. And his father obviously wanted him to follow that family tradition, to be an architect. So they sent him to the UK to study architecture, and he did very well. He went to one of the top schools, graduated with honors. But in his heart, coming back to the point I made to you all about passion, he had no passion for architecture. Guess what his passion was for?
Extempo.
You were almost there, yeah. His thing was spoken word and so on, right? That was his thing. And so he was working in the architectural field, and no passion, no love for it, and kept telling his family, I don't like this thing. I want to go and do my poetry thing. And in the end, his father decided, okay, you don't want to follow the tradition, then you're on your own. Go out there, find yourself, make your own living. He starved for a couple months, and then somewhere in his reflection on life, and don't ask me how it happened. He was doing very well, but not financially in the spoken word stuff. And then one day he said it occurred to him, you know, architecture is poetry in materials. And somehow in his head, translating the idea that architecture, the design of buildings, is a form of poetry, led him to start making designs of buildings and architectural forms that were totally amazing.
Next layer of uniqueness.
Yeah. And so as a result, he's back into architecture. He's still doing his spoken word thing. But at 24, he's famous in the UK. Right? Now that is what happens when ideas have sex. Right? Then the other thing that has happened is that there was another architect who had this idea of fantastic ideas of the types of shapes he wants to create and so on. But he just couldn't find a way of making it happen because some of the shapes were impossible to create using steel and metal. And then even so, the stress on the buildings, you know, like imagine you want to do a column that is almost leaning across, but not touching, the other end not touching the ground and so on. And they tried to figure out, this guy ended up having discussions on his team, bringing together a team that involved a biologist whose life study had been the butterfly, believe it or not. Now, I don't know if you know this, but butterflies, despite their size and their fragility at a microscopic level and in the world of their size, their wings are some of the most tensile substances that exist. Butterflies have been known to fly across the Atlantic. Of course, they die by the time they reach the end. But that is the strength and power of their wings. So this guy had looked at the structure of butterfly wings, how it was the design of nature and so on, together with a material scientist who looked at the properties of different types of material, from steel to concrete, and the types of fusion of materials that were possible. And they worked with that architect to find a means and to find the type of material that they could create that would enable his architectural vision to take real life shape. That's what happens when ideas have sex. So the challenge for you all, regardless of what your field is, what did you say your area was again?
Events decor.
Events decor, right. So there are a lot of people in events decor. Do you know Natalie John? Right. Yeah, because Natalie John is one of the entrepreneurs from the OECS who's really made her mark in the Caribbean as a whole in events, and it's called Dreamy Weddings, started off in the wedding field and so on. But even there, and in fact there is a St. Lucian guy who also does work for some of the big names in Hollywood in events as well. There is space for everyone in the field, but what differentiates you is what matters, right? And the challenge there is to find your niche and to create something. You know, if every events and decor person just did this, then okay, a dime a dozen, what's going to happen is that prices are going to go down to the floor, because if 10 people can produce that for me, I just go where I get the cheapest deal. But imagination is what makes the difference. If you start to design your events in a way, and you do, again, the fusion of ideas, besides just an event as a fete, you start thinking of ways in which you can make it distinctive and unique, then you're in business. Then people start to look at you differently. Then you start to command your price in the market, because it's not everyone who's doing the same thing, you know. So, for example, again, coming back to you with your extempo and so on, right? Your edutainment. Imagine you looking at. Go back to your one of your old schools. If you went to.
No, I never went to school. So basically, I don't do it in school. I don't do it in school. I don't do it in school. So what it is like, I do skits. So I'm basically a creative.
Mm.
My whole vibe, what I'm passionate about is educating through my creative vibe. So that's where the entertainment comes from.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So it's like more
Yeah, but I'm opening up a new niche for you.
A new niche. All right, no problem.
Right, so follow the logic.
That's right.
You do what you do and you're doing it well.
Yes, sir.
There are huge opportunities, maybe even bigger than what you now occupy in the education sector. If you can translate that into a pedagogy, right, a way of teaching and communicating with students in different subjects so that they get excited about their learning. And the best ways to do that, given that you're in the communication field, is in the area of languages. Teaching French, learning Spanish, really learning English. And not English as a boring subject, but English as something exciting, right? And even involving some of the students in some of the work that you do. So imagine if I'm a student at Leon Hess, and then my English SBA. I used to be the registrar of CXC, and one of the things I try to do is to change the SBAs and thing. Instead of the SBA being writing some essay or doing some research, do something that is exciting, that can either be a contribution to your community, to your family, a breakthrough in knowledge, researching something that has not been researched before. So in English, for example, I said the idea of the extempo. Another thing could be for you to now get young people involved in designing a podcast, right? Even one that you have a contract for, but you bring some young interns together, a group of 3 students, let that be the SBA. So they get graded for it, you get your work executed, but they are interns to you, so you're also making a contribution to them, but you broadening your scope of work. So these are the opportunities. I don't know if you all have...
Can I plug in a question? So for the longest while, we had been, of course, told that we should stay away from marijuana. And we know so many of our young people who would have been incarcerated because of affiliation with the drug. But right now we know that for some states, for example, in the US and for some European countries, they're building economies based on marijuana and the marijuana industry. As a small island developing state and with our history with marijuana, the plant, do you think that that would be one of the businesses of the future for us to explore, for us to be able to build our economy on?
Believe it or not, that's a very difficult question to answer. But I'll tell you why. Because, first of all, put it in context. Forget marijuana. Just look at the history of the relationship of countries like ours, small states, former plantation economies. You look at our history from slavery to now. From independence, almost every niche opportunity we get in order to earn a living in the global market, there's been a fight down. So remember before, post-emancipation, there was the plantation system. We had sugar estates. From slavery, these sugar estates got converted into private enterprises, but they were owned by large corporations. People were no longer slaves, but they worked in the sugarcane industry, paid low wages. Poverty in the rural communities was very harsh and brutal. Somewhere in the 50s, as we moved towards independence, you had that thrust to trying to empower ourselves. And our early leaders in the anti-colonial times, so John Compton and them, they started the banana industry, negotiated hard in order to ensure that we had a niche there. What happened with bananas? Bananas, different from just agriculture as, scraping a living from the soil, bananas provided an industry that enabled prosperity to come to rural areas. So the banana farmers were independent owners, maybe a 2 acres, a half acre, or whatever. But the banana industry was structured in a way that the farmers benefited. So you had the Banana Growers Association. The whole ecosystem for bananas was organized. You had shipping with geese. You had the ripening centers in the UK. Believe it or not, in the Windward Islands banana industry at this heyday, there were 100,000 people employed in England on the backs of the banana industry. These were the people running the transportation, the ripening centers, the distribution, the sales of bananas, 100,000 people. So, but we became prosperous from that. Fast forward to what, 1990 something, with the globalization of trade, you had huge American corporations like Dole growing bananas in Central America. And then they looked, although we are small market, small producers, they looked at this thing and said they wanted more control of the market. So President Clinton at the time led the US effort to remove preferential access. Because of our former colonial links to England, we had special access to the UK market that was protected, which helped us bring prosperity in the rural areas. That got cut because they said it's globalization, trade must be free, equal. We can't compete against Dole. We have no preferential access. We lost it. What happened to bananas? Went through. All of that time, marijuana is illegal. Young people get busted. Rastas get jailed. All kinds of stuff is happening. Then eventually now, marijuana has become a big thing. Why? Because researchers have done their thing, and there are a lot of old plants and medicinal plants and so on that our grandparents know about, that they've used over generations to cure different ailments. And these things are being discovered by people in the West with sophisticated research and technology. And they are extracting the vital elements from these things, and what was your grandmother's bush medicine suddenly becomes a tablet that the pharmaceuticals will sell to you at huge expense to cure your illness. So the point I'm making here, that's why I said it's difficult, is that marijuana has come of age. But, you know, in the last 50 years, Rastas, the Jamaicans especially, marijuana was a medicinal thing. Right? The University of the West Indies was the first one, researchers there, to discover that an extract of marijuana could help to cure glaucoma. Right? And this was just eye drops developed from marijuana. Since then, there have been many other uses. But what has happened over time, and that is where it is important for us to, our own communities, our community colleges, our universities, we have to do our own research about those things that the knowledge and wisdom of our ancients, and how we use those things to develop ourselves. Because researchers come from away, they pick up those things, they do the research, they take it abroad, and then they find a way of commercializing it, and we lose out. And that's what's happening with marijuana. There are some parts of the US, the Israelis, for example, have marijuana samples from all over the world, and they've done extensive research on that. So right now, marijuana is not your little plant that you grow in the bush anymore. We have at the OECS something called the Eastern Caribbean Liaison Services, ECLS. This is, I'm sure you all know about workers who leave the OECS and go to Canada to work on farms. When I first came to this job, I thought this was just sort of, you know, cheap labor. You bring people on the farms to pick stuff, strawberries or whatever. Well, I visited there a couple of years ago, and it is the most sophisticated agricultural operations I've ever seen. On one farm, there were 18, the size of the greenhouse was 18 acres in size, 18-acre farm. And that farm, on that farm, all they did was grow marijuana. To enter the farm, when you enter the greenhouse, there's a sort of entry point. I had to dress as if I was going in a surgical ward, right, with cap and a white gown and so on. They capped my shoes with a shoe cover. And then to get into, so you're able to see how the marijuana is grown and so on. To move into the other area where they sort and they start to do the genetic cloning of the thing, I even had to put on extra mask so my beard was covered. Right? So that is the level of sophistication of this thing that it has reached. And so in many ways, that new attractiveness of marijuana, I fear we may have even lost the plot on that. Because people who had nothing to do with marijuana before, who used to fight down the marijuana trade, are now the ones into it, and then they are monetizing it in a way that excludes all the black youth in the US, in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, who get jailed, who get busted for using marijuana. So that's one perspective. The second thing I want to point out too is that we need to be careful about those things as well, because the liberalization of marijuana should not be a thing or not be taken as a point where we treat marijuana as just a relaxation thing and anybody should take it, right? Because, you know, it has its psychotic effects on some people. And so just the illiberal use of the thing is dangerous. Any drug, if you drink too much, no matter what it is, too much excess of anything, and also when we're talking about chemical substances, if you drink a tea with too much sugar, it makes you, could end up being diabetic. I mean, sugar is not considered to be a drug as such. So it goes for sugar, it goes for marijuana. Anything in excess is problematic.
Hold on. I would like you to ask the questions of the mic, and let's be mindful of the time because the Director General has other things for him to attend to. And Tayabi, if you can let me know if there's anything of the virtual space so that we can include everybody. So we're just going to take one question per person if you have a question, okay?
Yes, sir. So, on the topic of the marijuana, based on what you're saying, what I'm understanding is it wouldn't make sense for us to enter the market because the first world countries are more advanced in that sector than us. So, the better thing for us to do would maybe like not just focus on having a different strain, but maybe allow two ideas to have sex. So we have a kind of chocolate, like a unique kind of chocolate marijuana vibe that is unique to Lucia. So like that would be Lucia, a special strain from Lucia that is like nothing else in the world. Or like maybe the idea marijuana could have sexy tourism. But anyway, we understand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
The tourism vibe, and then it could be regulated in a way where the two ideas could mesh. So you have the recreational and the medicinal and all that stuff. So, but what I'm saying is, what I'm understanding based on what you said is, it wouldn't necessarily be a good vibe for us to go into because the first world countries are just more advanced in that.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that we shouldn't go into it. I'm just pointing out historically, every time we get something that looks like a niche opportunity for us as small states, as developing countries, in the bigger global environment, people see, once they see the value in it, they come in and they crowd us out, right? So it means we have to be more deliberate and conscious and strategic about how we engage ourselves, right? And you're right, I think the key thing there is to determine what are the unique things that we can do in that space, right? Now, what some of our governments have done, like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, for example, they have partnered with some external investors who are on that cutting edge of research, and they are doing the research. But in doing the research, we have to ensure that we keep control of the genetic resources that we have. There is a way now of patenting those things. I don't know if you all know of a company, there are several of the big seed companies, Monsanto, for example. These guys have taken things like corn and done extensive research, done genetic engineering of corn seed, so that you can get a corn from Monsanto that is drought resistant, that produces the largest kernels of corn, that is sweet, that has all, it's like the perfect corn. But guess what? You cannot replicate it, right? So you buy the seed, you get your harvest, that's it. You harvest, you have to buy new seeds from Monsanto. Now, how did Monsanto come up with that? They came up with that by having corn from Peru, from all of the countries where corn is a big part of their culture. And then they did the genetic splicing. And more than that, having done the genetic splicing, they now go and they patent it. So it means nobody can reproduce that, right, without them benefiting financially. And it happens not just in agriculture, it happens in everything. Some years ago, an American guy patented the steel pan. The steel pan. And Trinidad and Tobago, an American guy patented the steel pan. And so he was in a position now to command royalties from production or use of steel pan. And this guy don't know jack shit, to use a polite term. about steel band and how it come about. And again, that you see, history matters, right? When we look at the history of steel pan and where it emerged, it was the days of when the oil thing had just started in Trinidad. Little ragamuffins from the ghettos in Port of Spain. They had all these steel drums there. Men want to enjoy themselves. They take a old steel thing and they start to beat it, just like you're beating a empty pot, and then they realize, but wait, now I can. Somewhere along the line, somebody, I don't know who it is, discovered a way of heating the pan, getting different tones, and the steel pan emerged. And even then, when it was being played in the streets of Trinidad and Tobago, the beginnings of Trinidad Carnival was looked down on by the upper classes in Trinidad. They considered that, a set of vagabonds just making noise in the street and behaving wild. And then look at where Trinidad Carnival has come, right? Look again at Peter Minshall, one of the artists, like the equivalent, like Adrian Auger here, in terms of design, of costumes and so on. Peter Minshall did costume design for the Olympics one year, right? So I'm saying that we have to ensure that we don't lose those things. Coming to St. Lucia, I don't know if you're all aware, somebody took away some featherless snakes, which is something we fear in St. Lucia because it's highly poisonous. But guess what? The venom of the featherless snake, it has been discovered, can be used to treat heart attacks or an extract from the venom, right? And that is because somebody took the snakes away and they figured the same way as the venom, if you get a snake bite, it induces a heart attack. Maybe there was a way of reversing the heart attack by selective use of elements of the venom. And it is like 300 US an ounce or a gram, right? Now, do we have control of that? No, we don't. In fact, there's going to be a big seminar in the next couple of weeks here in St. Lucia. A French doctor of Jamaican extract, Dr. Dabo, is one of the world's experts in that. And he's coming to St. Lucia to have a seminar with government on this thing to see what are the opportunities for us to reinsert ourselves and regain some measure of control. Trinidad was finally able to, by the way, get the patent back from the guy, but they had to pay him a substantial sum for him to pass it.
Wow.
And, it's just everywhere you turn, this kind of thing is happening. So, yeah. Yeah, it wouldn't be 50,000 US. You crazy?
The young lady from Southfield has a question.
I have a question. How do you think that the next big thing will promote sustainable development and environmental stewardship amongst young people, especially in countries facing climate change and resource challenges?
The best person to answer that is you all, the young people yourselves. No, I'm not being facetious. I'll tell you why. The reason I say that is because, again, coming back to the point about passion and what moves you, as young people, who feels it knows it. What are the things that affect you most? The best business ideas that any of you can come up with are those ideas where, because you've experienced something, you figure, okay, there's a problem that needs to be solved. And if it is a problem that is widely felt and affecting a large demographic of your peers, of young people globally, then that is potentially a big business, right? So it is really about what do you do to make things happen differently? And some of it does not require expensive laboratories and so on to do. There was a young guy in Africa who discovered a way of doing irrigation of farms using household waste, right? Household material, thrown away plastic bottles and so on, and he's developed an irrigation system. So there's a lot you can do by just thinking about the problems, and if you're passionate about it, finding solutions. And then looking at problems that exist all around us that, keep affecting people, but we don't have a solution. Challenge yourself to address it.
Hi, good afternoon. I also think that I just wanted to pick your brain a bit about the energy sector, because I believe because we're so close to the equator, we're in the Caribbean, we're feeling the effects firsthand. Every day, not great. But for us, the youth, to enter that sector and revolutionize it, we need access. And with it being such a tight-knitted industry, especially in St. Lucia, that prevents us from even accessing any doors, even looking into that problem. When you look at the regulations and the way everything is set up, who has control, who has majority here, how do we even get our foot in that door?
Hmm. Well, I would say the first thing is to, sometimes you have to challenge the status quo by shaping a solution that they don't see, and then you fight these other battles. So yes, the corporations have control of the energy sector and it's hard to break through. If you as a young person, the challenge then is how do we move from fossil fuels to renewable energy? And obviously, even things like solar panels, there are big corporations into solar panels. So you have to come with something that is unique and different, right? And shape a solution that, having shaped it, your prototype should show that it is a viable thing that can then be invested in. And then you look for investors. One of the things that we are trying to do at the OECS is to identify young people with that passion. About 4 or 5 years ago, we launched something called 30 Under 30 Entrepreneurs. And we identified those young people who are doing amazing things. Joanna Dujon from St. Lucia was one of the 30 Under 35. At that time, sargassum was hitting us hard and heavy. And he found a way of creating fertilizer out of the sargassum. We're going to be having a conference in a couple weeks' time with the Europeans, the French, and people, investors from all over the world who now want to invest in sargassum. Right? Joanna is being invited to that. So right now, you see, once these initial things start to happen, and again, it's a matter of creativity and really having unique ideas and exploring them and experimenting with them. It's not an easy road, but the fact is you must start with something viable. So you as a young person interested in energy, going down the road of saying, okay, I'm going to invest in a solar panel company. The Germans are producing solar panels, the Chinese are producing solar panels, you have huge corporations in the US. Luslec has set up solar panels. Finally, they realized that that could reduce their costs. So where's the space for you? I saw on Facebook some really simple, crazy things. Plastic bottle like this, right, with water, in a ghetto in El Salvador. Somebody cut a hole in the roof, push one of these in with water, daylight coming in, sunlight hitting it. Now, the next phase from that is if instead of having water in there, you have something, because there is a type of fluid, I think, that can retain, that retains the luminescence of the light. So even after the sun sets, even if it's for 4 extra hours, you have that glow. And what does it cost? This was, you don't have to take the Blue Waters water. It could be rainwater that you put in there with the luminescent stuff. This is all polluting everywhere in St. Lucia, plastic bottles. You pick that up, you design that. So people who live in low-income housing, they can't afford solar panels, but you can give them a solution that would work, help in some way. Yeah.
Before you ask your question, Noah, is there anybody online that we would like to pitch a question from online from? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Noah, you're the last question before, it is 6 minutes, it's actually more than 6, it's 9 minutes after 3, and
Okay.
Dr. Jules needs to...
Needs to head out. All right.
No, I can be longer if necessary.
All right,
Okay.
no problem. So I have 2 questions. The first one is when it concerns like the creatives, the ideas, and getting them patented. Like she has a unique idea for energy. I invented something, whatever it may be. How do we go about doing that in the OECS? Can you even do that in the OECS, or would you have to go to the States and all of that jazz to get it done and do?
Yeah. Well, that's something that we've been working on, because what has happened, The challenge is to harmonize all of this. Ideally, what we try to do in the OECS is have harmonized laws for almost everything, right? And that takes some time. Some countries are more advanced than others. What we try to do is to bring everyone to the table so that we get the best expertise in the OECS, wrapping their heads around the solution and shaping the legislation, right? If we need to hire talent from beyond the OECS, we look for a source of support to do that, and so we harmonize. We recognize that building entrepreneurship is not just about access to capital. As you say, it's also patents, it's also business development support, it's mentoring, it's exposure. So it's what we really need to create is an ecosystem, right? Where every dimension of that, you know where you need to go, right? And this is what we've had discussions, because in Dominica, for example, we have something called the CBU, the Competitive Business Unit. We're about to take a deep dive into that and look at how do we restructure it, because nothing is standing still. The CBU was set up, 20 years ago or more, and it has remained the same. Since then, in every member state, you have a whole lot of new initiatives. I mean, look at St. Lucia. You have Invest St. Lucia. You have a range of agencies. The youth agency is a new thing that this government set up, specifically focused on young people. So the need now is to how do we ensure that all of these things begin to work more collaboratively, right, rather than compete. Because when you have bureaucracies doing the same thing, it's really more money being spent on administration than on going directly to the people, the beneficiaries who need that capital. So that's part of the role that we play in OECS. And we've already spoken to a lot of the agencies about the need for us to sit and have a really deep exchange of ideas, look at who's doing what, where are the gaps, because as you see, the patenting thing is a huge gap. Intellectual property rights, the registration of companies. One of the things that we've worked on in terms of harmonized laws is in terms of the ease of doing business, because part of the objective of the OECS is to set up a single economic space.
Okay.
So if you register a company in St. Lucia, automatically your company should be registered everywhere else in the OECS, right? So you don't have to go and get lawyers to set you up in these different spaces. Importantly, if you're into the decorating stuff, if your main business is in St. Lucia and you open a branch in St. Vincent, you bring in all of your stuff into St. Lucia, you pay duty on it. Now, you want to then take some of that stuff and send to your branch in St. Vincent, you should not have to pay duty again, right? Because the duty is already paid. So all of these things, the basic architecture for that, we've developed the harmonized laws is before the governments to deal with. But even then, you have to now change the regulations that apply to those laws so that you have a smooth way of operating. Now again, it sounds easy to do, but it's not that easy to do, because you will not believe the things that have to be done to create the architecture to make that happen. So for example, in that thing I just described, one of the big things now is underline that those of you who've dealt with customs know that there's a software called Assicuda that they use to process everything. Assicuda, different countries are using different versions of Assicuda. So we now need to upgrade so everybody's on the same version of Assicuda, so they have this interoperability, we call it, right? Then on top of that, what we now need with this new law is a kind of macro version of Assicuda where all the national Assicudas can roll up their data. So whatever is done in terms of the payment of your tax in St. Lucia, any other country can tap in and see you've paid that tax, right? And then also the question of what do we do with that tax? If St. Lucia, let's say you end up becoming a major corporation in the OECS, you're a multi-million-dollar business, you have branches everywhere in the OECS, as you should aspire. You have business, multi-million dollars, you are everywhere. All of your stuff is, the bigger you get, the more you need to aggregate. Your store in St. Vincent can't order $100,000 worth of stuff, and your store in St. Kitts $50,000, and St. Lucia $500,000, and then you're paying taxes in all these places. That's a nightmare to manage. So you order $5 million worth of stuff, it comes into St. Lucia, you pay tax on that. But then half of that material goes out to other OECS countries. Who benefits, right? St. Lucia, wherever you import it, that country gets a tax. But we need some formula by which now the tax can be shared. So yes, so whatever portion is for St. Lucia gets shared with St. Lucia, or a formula if it says, just to make it not complicated, that let's say 30% of the taxation on a particular item in whichever is the receiving country is kept by the country in which the goods enter. The other 70% is spread among the rest of the OECS countries, right? Now again, what do we do with that 70%? Does the country who receives the bulk of the payment now have to distribute payments to all these countries? We have a central bank. So isn't that something maybe that the central bank should manage, so that that becomes now, instead of it being a fund where we give everybody their share, we just have this fund on the books. That's where your accounting expertise comes in. On the books, we know that, okay, this is the shape of the fund. These are the values ascribed to all the different member states within that fund. But what do we do with that fund? Is it something that governments can then call on to assist with their budgets? Or is it something that we keep as a sovereign wealth fund for the OECS for particular development purposes, maybe to help improve businesses, to build new infrastructure? You know, all of these are the possibilities, right? Now, in describing that to you all, that is also why, for us in the OECS, it's very important that technocrats do not sit and do those things in a vacuum, right? Because I can sit my background is education. I can sit and tell you the best ideas I think of what should happen in education. But the most important persons are the students and the parents, right? These are the people whose views should matter, and often they are not involved in those conversations. So we promote those things, right? That the involvement of stakeholders and beneficiaries is crucial to shaping solutions that work and are viable.
So earlier this year, the president of Guyana visited St. Lucia, and one of the things that he advised, it was more consortiums and collaborations. And you know, with us and our history as Caribbean people, we have not been able to perfect coming together to be able to create a West Indies Federation or so on. We are working now through CARICOM and OACS, but now for coming to small businesses who we deal with on a regular basis at the Youth Economy Agency. How do we encourage collaboration and consortiums and so on among small business people where they feel like they can equally benefit from profits, growing the business together, as we look to the future, because we recognize that smaller entities may not be the way of the future?
Okay, so it's an issue of trust, cultivating trust in each other. And I mean, trust is not a magic one thing. I think we have to create mechanisms and processes that help to do that. I saw a very interesting thing happening in Barbados. Prime Minister Mia Mottley, okay, you look at something like sea moss. A lot of people grow in sea moss, which is great in rural coastal communities. And two things are happening. Some big boys are buying the sea moss and processing it and getting it out there, exporting it and making huge profits. Yes, they pay the farmers, but ultimately the value of this is what you call the value added. It's not the raw sea moss, it's when you package it, even if you don't process it in any way, but just drying it properly, cleaning it up, and having it in a nice package makes a huge difference from having it in a plain plastic bag to say, here's 5 pounds of sea moss. Because what you sell 5 pounds of sea moss in a plastic bag for is different from what you're going to sell 5 ounces of sea moss that is powdered, just pounded into powder, and packaged nicely with the chemical composition, the nutritional benefits. The labeling sometimes is more value than the product itself, right? So it's the value added, right? So you have maybe, let's say we have about 3,000 sea moss farmers in St. Lucia. They realize, okay, CMOS is gaining in popularity. It's a big new thing to sell. Everybody's doing their own label and doing their stuff. There's only so much you can get with that. How do we develop this form of cooperation? Maybe different approaches need to be tried. So for example, we could say to the CMOS people, why don't you all form, just as we had the Banana Growers Association, form a CMOS Farmers Association. And that's where government now would have to play a serious role in ensuring proper governance of this thing. So it's not like me with my PhD becoming a member of the association and then trying to outsmart the people so they're doing all the production and I getting all the benefits, right? It has to be one where farmers, the governance of the thing has to be tight, proper, accountable to its membership. Once you get that done, then you're halfway on the road. Because then the next thing could be that the association can decide, rather than 6 of us here doing our own little bit of processing with different style of packaging and so on, why don't we get together, maybe ask government or the cooperative sector who's sitting on billions of dollars, our cooperatives, to come with us to set up a plant to properly process this thing, maybe under one label, and then we talk in volumes that we can think. Now, even if St. Lucia were to export 5 tons of CMOS a month, compared to the trajectory of CMOS on the international market, that ain't nothing. That's a drop in the ocean, which is all the more reason why small people cannot exist in their smallness solo and expect that we will overcome.
So they have to come
right?
together.
Coming together is a must for us to be able to do this. And even when we come together in St. Lucia and do that, if we don't do it with the rest of the OECS, our opportunity in the market is still limited, right? So that unity is imperative. One of the ideas I had at one point when I had just come into OECS, I noticed things like pepper sauce. A lot of good pepper sauces. I mean, a place like Dominica, you probably have about 20 varieties of pepper sauce. And it's not everybody making the same pepper sauce. So you could find pepper sauce with moringa, pepper sauce with ginger. A lot of creativity in it. So the thing is, how do we deal with that? And one of the things we discussed at the CBU is bringing together these pepper people and saying, listen, here are the standards that you need to meet for packaging, labeling, and everything. You can have your own identity of pepper. But what we will do as the OECS is that we create a brand. We could call it, for example, the liquid fires of the OECS. And then we do a 6-pack, small bottles of pepper light in a 6-pack under the label liquid fires of the OECS, but John Brown liquid fire, whatever name you give yours, whatever name you give yours. So that's a variety 6-pack. And then you have a barcode label on it. So when I buy that 6-pack as a tourist or you export that, people will try 6 samples of it at the same time. And if there's one that they particularly like, they can check the barcode and jump right into a website where they can order all your brand that they like as much as they want, right? So in that way, you begin to grow the thing in a way that... Now what Prime Minister Motley has done in Barbados is that she set up a lab and a factory where if you, as a young person, have an idea about a kind of, say, pepper sauce that you can make, you go there and you discuss your idea. There are food scientists who will take, or if you've done your own sample, they will analyze it, make sure it meets different standards for, degree or amount of salt or whatever ingredients. It meets the international standards. They will help you to perfect the formula, right? They will also help you pattern the formula to yourself. And then they will grow it, they will produce it in that factory. So the factory doesn't belong to any single person. It's like an incubator. They will, if you want, so you don't need to own the infrastructure. You need to have the idea. And you go, they improve the idea, make it marketable, produce it for you. If you want 500 bottles a month, they produce it for you. Your labels are put on, you export your stuff. So that makes it easier for somebody with a bright idea who has no access to capital to be able to do this.
So can you go elsewhere aside from that with your idea then? If you started in that way?
No, if you started in that way and you decide you know the volumes, because beyond a certain volume, let's say you reach a market in just one small city in China, which is, you know, 3 million people, they can't keep producing that for you. But what it does is help you get your foot in the market and grow you.
It will be yours.
It will be yours, but at some point you need to start looking at setting up your own plant if you're very successful.
I have a question. As it relates to the design and event industry, do you feel that, especially since there's a creativity component to it, do you think that there should be some form of industry standard in terms of having so many event decorators and in terms of pricing and undercutting? So for instance, you have the centerpiece as an example. Do you feel that we should at least come together and have like a base price in terms of, okay, well, for centerpieces, it starts at $80 and then you take it from there? Do you feel that we should, as event designers, come together to create some form of an industry standard so you don't have too much undercutting?
That would be ideal, but that's not how real life works in a lot of small spaces. But yes, it's ideal, and in fact, efforts have been made. There is an organization, I think it's called CWEC, of designers and event people.
I am part
That,
of it.
okay, so yeah. So that's a start, right? And what CWET has to do is to start to bring it.
Community over
Yeah,
competition.
yes. And what people realize is that everybody can find a niche in that space, and everybody will benefit. Of course, if you don't meet the standards and you start cheapening the market, eventually you do that to your detriment.
So we'll take the final question now from the virtual world. Is the person going to come on to ask a question, or they've typed it in the... They'll come on. Okay, awesome.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Am I being heard clearly?
Yes.
Okay, great. My question is related to disaster preparedness or disaster response. Essentially, what I wanted to ask was, given that there's a greater emphasis on disaster resilience, disaster preparedness in the Caribbean, um, Dr. Jules, what do you view as the youth's role um, in disaster response in the Caribbean, particularly young entrepreneurs? And are there any strategic initiatives being headed by the OECS in particular to support young persons, especially young entrepreneurs in this regard?
Thank you.
Yeah, there are a lot of opportunities in resilience in communities and even nationally as well. They exist in almost every sector. We just had a meeting in Barbados with the EU last week about parametric insurance, or insurance for the agricultural and fisheries sectors. And there's something called parametric insurance where you insure against disaster. But it's not like you get paid if this is totally damaged, you get a percentage of the damage. You get paid not for the damage done, but for the event that hits. So let's say you insure against your farm is insured against a Category 5 hurricane. If a Category 5 hurricane occurs, you get a payout automatically. Even if nothing is destroyed on your farm, you get the payout because it's tied to the event. That's what parametric is. Now, we've been having discussions with our governments. What do we do? Grenada with Hurricane Beryl got the largest payout ever from parametric, because since Hurricane Irma, the government has taken every form of insurance that was available through CRIF. And CRIF, by the way, is headed by a St. Lucian, Anthony Isaac. Every insurance taken out. So the government got about 45 million US in payout from Beryl. The water company got another set of million. So too did the electricity company for their poles going down and so on. And the total payout to Grenada was about 55 million. Now, in all the assistance that has come to Grenada, that is the largest amount of payout, because translate that into EC dollars. So we're talking 55 million US. That's over 100 million EC. So that's the largest payout. Now, that is still small in terms of the extent of the damage and the cost of recovery, but at least it makes a huge difference, right? So there are opportunities. In terms of young people, even in terms of the recovery, well, recovery is a whole area by itself because you're going to need people to do all kinds of things in collecting, cleaning up the country, sorting out like Prime Minister Gonzalez was explaining in Union Island, for example, they don't just have to collect all what was damaged on land, but a lot of the stuff on land that was blown out to sea, like galvanized, for example, they have to get divers, in some cases, people who could dive relatively deep with diving apparatus to go recover galvanized sheets that are on the seabed, because if you leave them on the seabed, it will destroy the seagrass. Your fishes will be badly polluted and affected, and it's just going to rust down there, right? So you need to, even that you need to collect. Then sorting all of that, collecting all of that, sorting it in one location, because you need to sort broken wood from galvanized, from concrete, sorting all of that. Where do you send that? How do you dispose of it? Some of it could be recycled. So even before you even start talking recovery and rebuilding or building back better, just the cost of recovery is astronomical. And again, even in there are entrepreneurial opportunities. But in a case like that, given the scale of the disaster, it would require groups of young people or groups of persons to really come together in a serious way to do what it is that they see as the business opportunity. In terms of resilience, building resilience going forward, the opportunities are even greater, because then you have to ask yourself, okay, so how do we, think of any sector, a farmer. How do I help farmers put in place irrigation systems that would help them withstand the drought? Because while we go through extremes, one time we totally flooded out, all crops wash out. The next couple months is like drought killing everything. So can we build a system where we can maybe make use of the floods, but also in making use of the floods to protect ourselves from the drought, right? What kind of systems can we put in place for that? That's an opportunity, right? And you just look at every negative impact is an opportunity. There's a Chinese saying that opportunity is crisis riding a dangerous wind. So think about that, right? Every crisis, every problem, if you look at it really deeply enough, is an opportunity. If you just want to put a plaster on a sore, then that's cool. You put the plaster and sore cure, it do cure, you're done with that. But if you want to go deeper than that and ask why did that sore occur in the first place, and go deep into the problem, you will find a solution that takes you further than you would have gone had that problem not occurred in the first place. And I think that's an important part of the mindset that you all need as entrepreneurs. Always you should welcome problems, right? Not that you should create them, but you should welcome them, because every problem that exists in society is something looking for an answer. And the answer should not be a plaster on the sore, but should be something that puts us somewhere higher and beyond what caused the problem to occur.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Jules. Thank you for joining us. Opportunity is crisis riding a dangerous wind. If we have taken nothing else from this, I hope that we remember this saying as we go forward, as entrepreneurs, as young people, as people who are aspiring to be successful in the future. So I hope you have taken a lot from the next big thing. I hope that you have some ideas.
I just want to add one final plug. I wasn't quite sure how this would have gone, so I had done a PowerPoint presentation, but for verbal presentation, I'd also done a speech, because at one point I thought it was a speech. But what I'd like to encourage you all to do, and all the listeners, is to log on to the OECS website, www.oecs.int, and you will put in your email address. So every fortnight, you will receive an update of all what is happening at the OECS, including any opportunities that exist. So when we have business pitches, opportunities for young entrepreneurs, all that is advertised, right? So you have an opportunity to participate in it. And so it's important to do that. And what I will do also is provide Crystal with, I'll fix up some of the material so it can be circulated or put through their own website so you all can make use of
We
it.
certainly will, and we'll share with our networks as we usually do via email. So please look out for that. We will share it with you via email, and we'll also put it on all our social media handles. So thank you very much, Dr. Jules. We will be engaging you further. And if you would like for you to send us any questions, for those of you who did not feel comfortable enough asking the questions or sending the questions through right now, you can send us those questions and we will forward them on so that you'll be able to get the answers that you would like. This is the first in the series called The Next Big Thing, and we hope that you were very much enlightened today and that you were inspired, you were motivated, and that we can aspire, we can put businesses up in the sectors that are the next big things happening, like, for example, resilience, and even thinking of irrigation, which I would not have thought of before now. Thank you so very much. And thank you for your questions. Thank you for joining us. And we do wish that you join us next month, God willing, for the second in our series, The Next Big Thing. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks.